and we are live here at SEC Media Days with the man who is in charge of all of it, SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey. How you doing, Greg?
I'm well, thank you. Good to be here. Thanks for being part of SEC Football Media Days. If we don't have media here, we have SEC Days, which probably wouldn't be very interesting.
Sure. Well, I mean, we're glad to be here, and I was going to ask you, this whole Media Days feels like a party of sorts. Do you feel like you're kind of hosting the party, like you're in charge of all this going on a little bit?
There is, and being in downtown Nashville, so close to Broadway, is probably heightened that notion.
Without a question, kind of the capital of the South, so to speak.
Yeah, and there's a bit of a social aspect here, kind of naturally, as writers and commentators move along and have different conversations and come to know different communities, different people. It's a fun few days.
Without a doubt. Well, we appreciate you making time. I want to ask you this regarding NIL. Is there a world that you could see where conference commissioners provide NIL guidance, or a situation where you have to wait on the NCAA and state legislation? Because no real plans from the NCAA just yet.
Well, we have a couple complexities. One is we have states that have set laws that limit some of that ability, or at least are intended to limit some of that ability. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense because no conference has its own NIL policy. So states are saying, we haven't even seen what will be reasonable guidelines that conferences might develop, and we're not going to let you oversee and enforce those. And so that approach is one that nobody's really been effective at explaining the why. We have had conversations about conference policy, so it's not just commissioners dictating direction. It would be our membership coming together around a set of policies. We also have to be attentive to the fact that we're involved in litigation on almost an ongoing basis. And that litigation does limit some of the options right now. And that may not seem apparent outside the world of college sports, but that's a reality we deal with. And that's part of the complexity of the situation we're facing.
What is your view on revenue sharing, specifically with individuals who you would consider revenue-producing athletes, essentially college football players?
The state of California, through its assembly, introduced, and I think they advanced a bill to the Senate that contemplated revenue sharing. So that's really the one specific description of a model. I think the question is really incomplete because it doesn't consider that, unlike professional sports, we're subject to Title IX requirements. That's a reality. The California bill allocated a very different level of revenue to three sports: football, men's basketball, women's basketball, by percentage that on its face appeared to be a violation of Title IX requirements. And a state can't pass a law and include a clause that says nothing about this law should be construed as a violation of Title IX. That's not the way this works. There's also important issues around employment law that have to be considered. And our student athletes are not asking us to be employees. In fact, they've been very clear they don't want to be. There are implications from that are not all roses and sunshine for them. I think what has to be understood, too, is just this notion of redirecting revenue by some mandate or law will alter greatly the student-athlete experience that's now provided. So medical care, mental wellness care, academic support, nutritional support, travel, the ability to accommodate student-athletes who are moving around for different needs, be it internships, a career exploration. We're in the summertime where our programs are sending groups of student-athletes abroad, both for competitive purposes, for service purpose, separate from competition, and for learning purposes. All of those things are impacted when we change the economics of college sports. And lastly, I think it's important to note that our colleges and universities provide the foundation for our Olympic movement and our Olympic success. And if you change significantly the economics of college sports, you change our Olympic development, our Olympic training, and our Olympic support model. And that has big picture implications on medal podiums. And so I understand the question. I understand the motivation for some in California. I just think it's been a really incomplete dialogue on realities that actually are the assets, the benefits currently present now in college sports that would be significantly affected if we went down that road.
When it comes to hot topics in college sports, you got NIL, and then right behind it or right up there with it, transfer portal.
Yeah.
In a perfect world, what would you change about the transfer portal as it stands right now?
I would not have had both events layered on each other immediately. It's like going to the doctor and being prescribed 2 medicines when you're ill, and you don't know which one helped you. That's not the way medicine works, but that's the way NIL and transfer freedom has happened. So let's go back. We had COVID. We had a move to a one-time transfer exception that was going to apply to all sports. Remember back 5 years ago, 5 sports all served a year of residence, and every other sport had a one-time transfer exception, could transfer and play right away. But there was a level of control in there that had to be reconsidered. And then in the interim, in the middle, around COVID era, there was no one-time transfer. It was kind of freedom. There was no expectation of timing for declarations. So post-COVID, the NCAA has been directed to move back to the one-time transfer exception. So a young person has one opportunity to say, you know what, I want to go someplace else and play right away. I think that can be educationally sound. There's also been clear messaging to the NCAA that get out of this waiver business. And I hope that will take place. The reality was there was a 365-day transfer declaration window. That's now narrowed to 60 days. I think that should be shortened greatly. I think it went on too long. We needed to do something. We addressed it by going from 365 down to 360. The research shows that young people in the first 10 days, in the majority of circumstances, are deciding whether to enter the transfer portal or not. Lastly, we have to be attentive to the educational outcomes that are impacted by transfers. You actually reduce the likelihood of graduation. When you transfer, you lose credits. The more you transfer, the more you inhibit that likelihood of graduation. And we need to be mindful over time of what's actually happening, because we are engaged in an educational endeavor. This is not all about transferring and accessing playing time.
Now, us as college football fans, tradition is so important to the fabric of this sport. And right now, there's so much going on with the evolution of college football, and the landscape is changing. And with you being the person who I think a lot of people look to for direction for the sport, how do you go about navigating that?
Well, I look locally first. I think one of the unique aspects of our expansion is the ability to restore rivalries. We do impact the conference's membership, which is just one of those tough circumstances. But the Texas and Arkansas rivalry that goes back decades and decades, obviously A&M in Texas, but also Oklahoma, Missouri, we're both part of the Big Eight, and so we want to honor those traditions. From our scheduling standpoint, that's actually a key question for us in the number of those games of passion, those high-intense rivalry games. How often are they going to be played? Is it every other year or every year? I would hope, in fact, I wrote a letter to our membership saying, from our perspective, it'd be nice if everybody stayed where they were for a while. Now, I don't get to decide that. People can they have criticized me for saying that. But some calmness so that we can onset the expanded college football playoff. You have a new NCAA president who's going to have some new thoughts. I've spoken about potentially considering expansion of the NCAA basketball tournament. That's something traditional, but the traditional went from 16 to 32 to 48 to 64 to 68. I don't think you have to just ignore the special nature of March Madness by blowing the bracket up to some huge number, but I think some incremental adjustment can be positive as more and more commitments are made to support high-level programs, particularly in men's and women's basketball. So I think we have to be in dialogue about what makes college special. Marching bands, fans in big stadiums, Saturday afternoons, Saturday evenings, playing games on campus. Those all are special pieces, and Roy Kramer, the sixth commissioner of the SEC, visited with me almost 30 years ago, and he said what makes college football special is its impact on campus, and that needs to be at the forefront of our thinking.
I think a lot of college football fans that just heard you say that are like, yes, Greg Sankey is one of us talking about fall Saturday afternoons, what makes it special, and marching bands, and Texas and Oklahoma.
I still enjoy listening to games on radio, which is like, that's as traditional as you can get.
Absolutely. No, without a doubt. And I guess two traditional schools, Texas and Oklahoma, joining the SEC next year. I mean, they'll be here next year. SEC Media Days in Dallas. From a Saturday product perspective, what do you expect them to contribute to the SEC?
Well, they'll be in addition to 14 incredible programs and 14 universities. So right now, over the last 25 years, 6 different SEC football programs have won national championships. I think if you look at the other conferences, the most in any other one conference is 2. When you add Oklahoma and Texas, over the last 25 years, we will have had 8 of our 16 members win college football national championships. What that speaks to is the highest level of football competition that stands unique from all other conferences at this level. There's a rigor, there's an excitement, there's an intensity. The young people who attend want to be part of all of that and challenge themselves, and many prepare for their next opportunity athletically to see if they can achieve the NFL. But even NFL players come back and speak about the special experiences on our campuses. That's why, going back to your earlier question, I'd like us to be even more thoughtful about how we manage transfers in the future.
Staying in that vein of expansion, since the announcement of Texas and OU going to be joining the SEC, we've had the dominoes kind of start falling. I mean, USC and UCLA joining the Big Ten. Been a lot of buzz around Florida State and what they may or may not do, which kind of brings me to my last question. Do you expect the SEC, or is the door open rather for the SEC for future expansion?
We're focused on our growth to 16. There's a lot of work that has been done. There's a lot of work still to be done in advance of July 1st, 2024. We're very mindful of what's happening around us. I'm not a recruiter. I've not been a recruiter. We want to do things so well that people are interested in being a part of us. That's literally what happened with Oklahoma and Texas. But our focus very clearly is on 16. It's not on further growth, with the understanding that we may have to adapt to the circumstances around us, and we're always going to be attentive and prepared should that need arise.
Absolutely. Well, Greg Sankey, thank you so much for taking some time, and enjoy the rest of Media Days. Almost there. Almost the finish line. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.